Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hope Without Sight with your host, Sailor Cooper, and
this is Tyler Evans, your co-host.
Yeah, we're in episode 20. And we figured this would be the last episode of the year because, we're ahead of the game. And I know, like, it's the holiday season, right? People are busy going to Christmas parties, getting ready for Christmas. And so we thought this would be episode 20. And to close out the year, I'd like to welcome a very special guest who's overcome a lot of challenges in life, including being a life coach, teaching people about mental health, sexual trauma, and so many other stuff. Please welcome Pey Carter. Pey, how are you doing today?
Good morning. I didn't know this was the last episode of the year for the podcast, so I feel very honored.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Awesome. Yeah, we thought it'd be the last one because we've gotten a lot done, and like I said, it's a holiday season, so we want to give people a break. And Tyler, we want a break too, I guess, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And of course, we still have our radio station. We have a radio station called Real Variety Radio, folks. If you want to tune in, you can download the Get Me Radio app. You can go to our website at listen.realvarietyradio.com. And we have a clubhouse called The Sailor Show. We have a clubhouse club called The Sailor Show.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, on to the podcast. So, Pey, let's get started. Tell us about yourself, and because it's obvious I looked at your website. I'm very fond of your website. You're about to publish a memoir. So just give an introduction.
Sure. So, hi, my name is Pey. I live in Wisconsin with my 2 kids and my partner, Chad. I've experienced a lot in my life. I am 36. I just turned 36 this year, and I have personal experience with military sexual trauma. I have a variety of medical issues. There's a very long list of it, as well as domestic abuse. I'm a veteran as well, and part of the LGBTQ community. So I spent the last 10 years doing a lot of advocacy work, sharing my stories and just trying to raise awareness about the communities that I belong to. I've been asked for many, many years that I should write a book, but for some reason, putting your stories on paper for other people to read is a lot more intimidating than speaking in front of people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I was placed this year to really work on it. So I'm very excited that it will be released next year. Right now, I have a Kickstarter campaign that just started to help raise money for some of the costs. You can back it and get signed paperbacks, all sorts of things. So I've experienced a lot, and I'm just really happy to be here and help raise awareness in whatever way I can.
Oh, great. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I look forward to you telling us about all the experiences you've been through and how you've overcome a lot of challenges. So first, we want to thank you for serving in the United States military. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where did you serve?
I was in South Korea. I was a broadcast journalist for the Armed Forces Network Korea. So I was initially stationed down in Daegu, and then I went up to Camp Yongsan, which was in Seoul. So I did everything from hosting a radio show, doing radio commercials, TV commercials, shooting news stories, editing news stories, everything but anchoring the news.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you're right up our alley, because that's what we wanted. We're into broadcasting as well. We have a radio station, and of course, we have a podcast. So the Armed Forces Network, how do military personnel listen? Do they have radios or what?
Yeah, so when I was stationed in Korea, that's the only thing I can personally comment on. But yes, we were actually the only radio station in the whole country that was in English. So it was really neat. It was cool. I got to go experience a lot of stuff, travel around the country. It was fun.
Oh, great, wonderful. So I know this stuff's very sensitive. You only have to share what you feel comfortable. So yeah, unfortunately, you experienced a lot of sexual trauma in the military. I mean, how did you deal with that afterwards?
So I had joined the military for a few reasons. I actually grew up all over the world, and then my parents decided to settle in Wisconsin, which was very difficult for somebody that spent their formative years overseas in countries like Malaysia, things like that. And so when I was very lost as a kid trying to fit in when I really stuck out. And when I was about 16, 17, my dad gave me this letter. My grandfather, who on my British side, my mother's from England, had died when I was young. And he handed me this letter, and inside was a 12-page letter to me done on a typewriter where he shared all his experiences during World War II. He served as a gunner for the British Army. And that was part of why I joined the military, as nobody else in our whole entire family had served. I thought doing so would kind of honor his memory for me to feel more connected to him. I loved music. My whole life as a teenager had all that teenage angst. So my whole life, revolved around music. So I was very excited to find out that I could go into the Army. I'd be able to travel like I used to and be able to, do music, right? Interview celebrities, things like that. Fortunately, during advanced individual training, I was assaulted by somebody I considered a friend and other service members. So it was 6 months after my 18th birthday, 5 months after I graduated high school, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of my service. When I tried reporting, I was interrogated for days without any sort of consul or advocate. And at the time, this is mid to late 2000s, military sexual trauma wasn't a thing that people recognized. The only people with PTSD were men that served in combat. So when I went to go to try to get help because I wanted to continue to serve and honor my grandfather's memory, I was misdiagnosed as bipolar and forced on up to 4 medications at a time. So it was very, very difficult for me to try to manage all that and do the job and do what I wanted to do. So I was discharged. Luckily, I got an honorable discharge, which is not common for MST survivors. And it was a really big adjustment because I did get diagnosed with PTSD right away. That bipolar was thrown out when I started seeing a civilian doctor, but nobody had any experience with a service member or veteran that had military sexual trauma. So at the same time that I'm trying to receive care, I'm also educating therapists. So it's very interesting. I started doing advocacy work in 2012. I don't know if you've heard of the documentary, The Invisible War.
No, never have.
Okay. It's a really great documentary about military sexual trauma, and it came out in 2012. And it just blew my mind because I didn't know how many other victims were out there. And I had been very silent because when I was discharged, I was told, you're not a veteran, you're an embarrassment to all the women that served before you, et cetera. So I didn't consider myself a veteran. I didn't know that there was other people that this had happened to. And it was just like this light switch, because I was in shock. Like, how does society not know this is happening? How is this continuing? Like, it's been going on for decades. How does nobody know? And like I said, it was a switch. And a couple months later, I was in Washington, D.C., talking to politicians that represent Wisconsin and Minnesota, trying to promote some legislation or bills that were being drafted to help support victims of military sexual trauma. So.
Oh, wow. So now they thought you had bipolar disorder when it really was PTSD. And after you were discharged, you began advocating for good mental health services. And that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Today you're a life coach. You also mentioned on your website you've had a lot of other chronic illnesses and disabilities. What are those?
Sure. So for a long time, I had just PTSD, which I don't mean just to minimize it, but that is one condition, right, that you deal with. And back in 2017, I was in a really good place. I had all these coping skills. I had a service dog. I was hiking. I was walking. I was managing things really well. But then I got shingles at the age of 29, and it wasn't that bad. I had 2 rashes about the size of half a dollar coin. One was on my side or on my spine, and it caused permanent damage to my autonomic system. So all of a sudden I went from being very able-bodied to physically disabled. My body suddenly couldn't regulate things like heart rate and blood pressure when I changed positions. So standing up, crouching down, walking for extensive periods of time, standing for too long, I would get really dizzy and pass out. So I couldn't, you know, a lot of people when they have anxiety or they're stressed, they do a mad cleanup of their house, right? I couldn't do that. I couldn't tie my son's shoes. I couldn't go for walks. I couldn't go to the store. So it was very, very difficult. So that's a diagnosis of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a big mouthful.
Oh yeah, big mouthful.
Big mouthful. So basically, you know, saying your body doesn't regulate things when you change positions. And I have a separate diagnosis of dysautonomia, which basically means dysfunction of the autonomic system, because the shingles also damaged my internal thermostat. So my body could no longer regulate temperature. So for example, I don't sweat at all during the summer. I often don't realize when my body is overheated. Same thing, similar in the cold. You know, when you get too cold, your body is supposed to bring your heat to your core to protect your vital organs. Mine sends them to my fingers, my toes, my legs, wherever it just feels like sending them at that moment, not where it's supposed to go. So as you can imagine, that was really, really, really hard to struggle, you know, to deal with. And then during the course of treatment for that, I found out that I have a tissue connectivity disorder called Ehlers-Danlos. There's lots of subtypes of it. My daughter and I found out my daughter also has it, the hypermobility type. So all of my joints from my neck down to my toes are hypermobile. I didn't know when I went into the military that I had that. So as you can imagine, running on concrete during ruck marches, really wrecked my lower joint, so my hips, everything down. So I've had both my feet fused, for example. I have degenerative damage in both my hips and my lower back. Probably need a hip replacement in about 8 to 10 years, so before I'm 50, which is really nerve-wracking. Let's see. I also have a generalized seizure disorder, fibromyalgia. I have a eating disorder called avoidance restrictive food intake disorder, which is a sensory eating disorder, nothing to do with body image or body weight, but I struggle a lot with taste, sight, texture of certain foods. And then a few months ago, I was diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum disorder. So I have a list.
What? You've been on the autism spectrum disorder when you didn't even know it? Because that's what's coming out, you know, nowadays. Many people who had autism all their life, they're just now getting diagnosed.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that I, you know, thought I was doing masking because of my PTSD. That's where it was really like, I thought it was just part of my PTSD until I was diagnosed with a sensory eating disorder. And then I really I started paying attention to my sensory issues and thought, all right, like, let me just go see if I have a sensory processing disorder. I didn't think I was on the spectrum. I thought maybe I just had a sensory processing disorder, but I am on the spectrum. So. Yeah,
that's part of autism, sensory issues. So I guess you seem to be high functioning autism.
You know, it's all a spectrum. I don't like the term high functioning, to be honest, because I feel like it is negative towards people that struggle more than I do. I hear it's on a spectrum. So
yeah.
But I think part of it too is that Ehlers-Danlos, it's a tissue connectivity disorder. So fragile skin, poor wound healing, basically faulty collagen in the tissue. And what is our body made up of? Tissue, right? So comorbidity between Ehlers-Danlos and other conditions. Practically all the ones that I have a comorbidity with that tissue connectivity disorder, including being on the spectrum. So,
wow. So what caused you to have like all of these physical conditions, such as the fibromyalgia, the shingles, and all of that?
Well, I was still part of the generation where they had the chickenpox parties. There wasn't a vaccination for chickenpox at the time. So I was part of the chickenpox parties. I'm not sure if you know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I was, you know, I could get shingles. I think I got it traveling is what my doctor and I thought, but it just caused that permanent damage. We think that the Ehlers-Danlos kind of set me up, and then it was just the shingles that triggered it. So that's probably the baseline of how I got it. And then it's just, as you go on, you know, you just doctors figure out what your health issues are. A lot of them are pretty considered rare or uncommon. I would say that my fibromyalgia was triggered because I was in an abusive situation. So stress can really, stress can really trigger it. And now that I've been out of that situation for quite a few years, I only have flare-ups when I'm very, very stressed. So.
Yeah, because you've also you've been through domestic situation as well. Gosh, you've even been through divorce, and honestly, I don't like divorce. It's not good. I mean, a marriage is there for a reason, to last for a lifetime, but at the same time, I do understand that, you know, people should never stay in a marriage that's completely unhealthy and that's damaging. So, you know, in the end, if divorce is what's best, it's best. I mean, that's why you know, well, the way I see it, a couple should not get married fast. They should know who they're marrying beforehand, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so so like, how did you overcome like all the other hardships, like divorce and all the other hardships you mentioned?
Well, when you are suddenly stricken with a diagnosis that completely changes your life, right? Like I said, PTSD is mental, right? It doesn't affect you generally physically. So like I said, all the coping mechanisms went out the window. My service dog, even that I had to go to another veteran because I couldn't even regulate myself, let alone, you know, give commands to a dog that went everywhere with me. So I was in a very dark place for a long time because I wanted to be the person that I was before I got sick. So I wanted to try all the medications, all the alternative treatments, all the Eastern medicine. And every time that one of those didn't work, I would just sink lower and lower and lower. And when you're in a relationship that says, you know, that your appointments are a hindrance, or you are faking it, trying to ride the system, because I have 100% disability rating from the VA. So I have compensation for that. So try to say, oh, you're riding the system, or, you know, it wouldn't be that bad if you just did this. And so that like just added to it. But at some point, you know, especially when I got out of that situation and I was in a lot of therapy, you know, I realized to better take care of myself, to be a better parent for my kids, to be a better daughter, to be a better friend, I really needed to start paying attention and taking care of myself. So what does that mean? What are my body, excuse me, my body limitations, right? Do I need to try to force myself to go hiking because I really miss hiking, where I'm going to get sick for days and pass out? Or do I realize, okay, I can do a walk early in the morning for this amount of time or this distance? And I think too, one of the big things that my body has taught me is really just to slow down and listen.
Yeah, you just
everybody. Yeah, we're in this capitalistic society, right, where people are expected to work themselves to the bone, right? That productivity equals the worth of somebody. And I think everybody, right, that's doing that, at some point their body's telling them, hey, this is too much, right? You need self-care, you need to slow down, whether it's, you know, getting headaches or whatever it is, right? Your body is telling you, hey, slow down, you're overworking yourself. And being forced to do that, right? It's changing. It's like, wow, all right, this is how I'm reacting to this. This is what my body is telling me. I need to do this.
Yeah, you sure do.
Yeah, and realizing too within the therapy and all these realizations that my worth doesn't equal my productivity, right? I don't have to be out working a full-time job. making my health worse, right?
No.
Because it's already having medical issues, then to try to force myself to work a job where I'm masking, where I'm getting dizzy or whatever, is really stressful. And so understanding that I'm not broken, that I am worthy of love, that I'm a great parent, even if I have all these medical issues, even if they do limit me in ways that sometimes are very frustrating, I have the tools that I need to navigate that.
Yes, and you don't put so many demands on yourself, especially demands that society gives you. You just do what you can to give back.
Mm-hmm. And that looks like so many things, right? You don't have to be working a job in order to community. And so my way of doing that is by speaking, by writing this book, by doing this podcast, is getting out there and helping people to understand what the challenges are for different communities.
Now,
I was just going to say quickly, like for me, I don't look disabled, right?
No,
I look young. All of my conditions that affect me physically are invisible. And that's very challenging for people to understand. So going out there and say like, hey, I have disability plates because my body can't regulate temperature going from an air-conditioned car into the lovely humidity and high 90s that we find ourselves in the summer in the Midwest, and then into an air-conditioned store. I get really dizzy. I'm at a risk of passing out, having heat stroke, etc. And saying, hey, disability plates, for example, aren't just for people that have trouble walking or elderly people. Like there's so many reasons why somebody can have disability plates.
Because there are these disabilities out there that aren't visible, and like a lot of people won't believe it because it's not obvious right away. And so, wow, you're writing a book, and I see you have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree as well.
Yes, I do.
And you're completing another degree by 2025?
I've temporarily withdrawn for that just so I could focus on my book. But yes, I've been working on a doctoral program as well.
Now, is your book out yet, or is it going to come out soon?
It's going to come out about May 2023.
Oh, awesome.
So it's done. The Kickstarter campaign is to help just finish up with editorial costs, publishing costs. If you go through a traditional publisher, which I didn't want to do, they actually get the rights of your book, and you get a very small percentage of the royalties. So I am wanting to, so I'm working with an indie publisher so that I can maintain all my royalties for my book and have the rights to it. So.
And your book is about how to find purpose in life, correct?
So it is my memoir, journaling, sharing my journey of what it was like going from able-bodied to disabled, how I struggled with that, and then the lessons that my body taught me.
Wow, so. Beautiful, wonderful. And we'll be able to find your book on Amazon, Audible, all the book services, right?
Right, yeah, and you can go to Kickstarter right now and find out more information. Just the name of my book. So the name of my book is My Body's Not Your Dartboard. So you can go to Kickstarter, for example, and search for that, and you'll get all the information.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. And so besides your book, what are your future goals? I know you want to inspire the world, right? But other than that, what are your main future goals in life?
I would love to. So a couple of years ago, I did a storytelling theater project where I collected stories of military sexual trauma from all around the country, from people of different ages, different situations, and I put it into a theater project that was performed in Wisconsin and California. It's called Speaking Out Why I Stand. I would love to, one of my goals after I get done with this book is to do a similar thing with people with disabilities and put that into a book. So a collaboration, a shared book with stories from different people. Yeah.
And maybe Tyler and I can be a part of your book and vice versa, because Tyler, tell our guests what we're doing. Hello, Tyler, you there? I think he probably left. You're here? So Tyler, tell our guests what we're doing together. Aren't we writing the book?
Memoir, actually. We're basically going to talk about our lives, about how, we've overcome, adverse circumstances similar to what we're doing with our podcast, except we're doing it in writing form.
Yeah, because
and basically what we want to do, along with our podcast, we want to inspire others through our writing as well.
That's right. Because both me and Tyler, we're like almost brothers together. We're both blind and we have very similar interests and we're on this journey together, right?
Yes, we are. And to me, it's not about, the money or anything like that. And, that'll probably come in the future, but it's about inspiration. It's about doing what you love.
Exactly.
See, that's the key. Like, if you don't love what you do, it's not a career. It's just another job. But if you love it and you put your mind to it, it becomes your career. And not only a career, a hobby. That is a life. It's not only a hobby either. It's a lifestyle.
It's a lot. Yeah, you go.
I like
that.
that.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about my advocacy work. But I consider it a privilege that I am able to do so. I know that there's a lot of people with disabilities, with military sexual trauma that don't have a rating or don't SDI and can't do so. So I love going and talking to people and spreading awareness. And every time I do, it doesn't matter what topic it's about, I always have somebody coming up to me afterwards, saying, thank you. I thought I was alone. I haven't met anybody else that is experiencing this, or I haven't thought about talking about it to other people because I didn't think that they would understand. And that's what I just feel like my purpose is. And I will go places and I see an accommodation issue, I will raise it.
Yeah.
I cannot keep my mouth shut. Like, hey, this button doesn't work, or hey, you've got somebody kicking the door opener. Like, So.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so do you, question,
Sure.
What's your service dog used for? Is it for emotional support? Is it, because I don't think you're blind, are you?
No, I'm not. And I no longer have my service dog, but it's so an emotional support animal is basically, it's not an animal that's trained. It's for housing. If you want to live in a place that doesn't allow pets, and say you have some sort of chronic illness, mental health, and having a pet, because a pet can do a lot for a person emotionally, right? Mm-hmm. So an emotional support animal is just an animal that you can have in the house that provides emotional support. So a service dog is a trained dog that has tasks to help navigate a person's disability, right? So you can have mental health service dogs. My dog, for example, would let's see, what's a couple of commands that he had? It's been 7 years since I had him and had to let him go, but he would do block, where he would stand in front of me, because everybody has a different idea of what personal space is. And when you have social anxiety or PTSD, you don't want people getting too close. So for example, he would stand in front of me, so I would have that space. I had a lot of hypervigilance. And so he had a command where he would be at my side, but facing the other direction. And he would let me know if somebody was coming up behind me, so I could allow myself more space. He was also trained to help me find exits if I was having an anxiety attack. So yeah, so Mo is a service dog. He was great.
Oh, wow.
Good. So you had to give up your service dog?
Yeah, unfortunately, when I got the shingles and I got really sick, because I couldn't, dogs are great, like trained service dogs, but you have to be able to give them a command. And you have to not only be able to give them a command, But service dogs aren't robots, right? They are still going to mess up sometimes or get a little distracted. And if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, right? And so when you're getting dizzy standing up, when you're, crouching down, you're dizzy all the time in public, you can't give a dog commands, one, when you should be, right, on time, when you need to. And if they're, doing something that they shouldn't be, so say, for example, he's supposed to sit right next to me or walk and heel, right, walk right next to me. And if he's getting a bit too far ahead or a bit far behind, like I couldn't, stop him. I couldn't give him the commands because I was so focused on making sure I didn't pass out or, so he did get placed with another veteran. He loved working. Anytime I got his vest out, he was so happy and ready to go. And I didn't have the heart to turn him into a family dog. I didn't have the heart to do so. So he was placed with another veteran. I was able to help kind of with that transition. So it was really good. It was hard, but it was the best decision that I could make at the time.
Yeah. And now, of course, you have 2 kids. It seems to be you've been able to, even though you've had a lot of these challenges, you've been able to raise 2 kids successfully, which is awesome, wonderful.
Good. 1 sec, folks.
Yeah.
1 sec.
In there. Oh,
what's up?
Are you on your show?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So you've been able to raise 2 kids really successfully, which is wonderful.
Well, and I think too, having disabilities, it gives me a different perspective than I had before. I see the world differently because I was one of those people, just, we're taught as a society, and sometimes, how our parents raise you, that disabilities are something you could see, right?
Right.
There's something you could see.
Oh, yeah.
Something I talk about in my book too is, I was part of that where it was, you'd see somebody that was disabled and it's, you'd have your parents say, don't look, don't stare, right? And so it's not even encouraged to do a smile or a wave. It's to completely ignore their existence, which carries over into adulthood. When I was doing, I was doing an interactive workshop on disabilities, and I had a woman say to me that she wished that all disabled people, when she was out in public, could just be in a corner so she could pretend they didn't exist, because looking at them made her uncomfortable. And so realizing and that's what I found, that it comes down to, like, ableism and ableist language, it comes down to fear, right? One, disability is a biological fact, and that is very scary for some people, right? Very scary. And then just also not having any experience with disabled people, what it means to be disabled, what that is like. So with my kids, my daughter has the same tissue connectivity disorder as I do, but it's not a disability for her. And a lot of what we are doing is preventative care so that she doesn't, for example, go into the military and have, like I was, having my first foot fused at the age of 21, right? And needing a double hip replacement in 10 years. I want to try to prevent that for as long as possible. And so being able to go into her schools and educate other elementary kids on disabilities and what that looks like, I'm glad that I have that opportunity, that I see the world differently, and I can relate that to my kids.
Wonderful. Good. And now, do you use a wheelchair now, or can you walk?
So I have a walker and I have a wheelchair. I tend to use my walker more in the summer. So it's one that has a seat. So it's not because, say, I have trouble walking, but so that I have a seat if I get dizzy, because walking down an aisle in Target, for example, right, there's no chairs. And so during the summer, which is when my POTS and my dysautonomia is very exasperated because of the heat and the humidity, I tend to use a walker. And then if it's really bad, I use a wheelchair. But then also with my joints, if I'm in a lot of pain, I use a wheelchair, because I would prefer not to have a double hip replacement for prevent that for as long as possible. So to help slow down the wear and tear on my joints, I will use my wheelchair.
Wow. Now, how do you know, like, when to go inside if it's too hot or too cold, since your body can't regulate temperature?
So one is, paying attention to the weather channel, right? And what the temperature is, and then looking at what we are wanting to do. So for example, in winter too, there's a lot of times where I can't go sledding with my kids because it is too cold. I can do it on some days, I can't do it on others. Same with, walking through holiday light displays. Like I tend to find ones that I can drive through or are more accessible. But just paying attention to, what we're doing, what the temperature is like. I also go off of what other people's bodies are doing. So if I'm with someone and their face is getting really flushed or they're sweating, that is a big cue. I give my friends, my partner, and even my kids the permission to get very just because I get so stubborn, because I'll feel okay, right? I'm out there and I generally feel fine. So I give them permission to really push, hey, you need to drink like Gatorade or something with, water, you look like you're getting hot. And so I give them permission to get really kind of forceful with it, because I'll be like, I'm fine, I'm good. And then the next day it's a whole lot of problems. So it's a balance. It's really tricky it's really tricky.
It is. Yeah. And the other, also the work I like that you're doing as well is you're fighting against the U.S. education system. I think I saw on your website, which is not the best, as you know.
I as a student, I've had to educate professors on my accommodations. Even with my ADA accommodations, I have professors that really push against it, because they're used to people that are blind, people that are deaf, people that have a learning disability, right? They're not used to people that need accommodations for other medical issues, especially, if you're neurodivergent. And so during my master's, especially, I had to really advocate for myself. And then the neat thing was, when I was in my last year, I had incoming students who found out about me who have medical issues and accommodations, and were coming to me for mentorship, which was really, really neat. I didn't even know until I was in my undergraduate program, and I started having seizures in my sleep, but we didn't know what it was. I was just very fatigued during the day, which makes it really hard to go to class, to concentrate, to turn things in. And I was connected with disability services. And at the time, I didn't know that, you could use disability services for other medical issues than what I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, right? And so it was very eye-opening to me. And my advisor there was the one that really taught me how to advocate for myself. And so that's what I just carried over for the rest of my, life to here I am today, is because that advisor helped me advocate for myself within the education system. So that's what it's all about. You just have to advocate and fight for what you need. Now, do you have a podcast yourself or not yet? No, I don't. I did for a little while, but it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. And when you have some other things that need to take, that need to be prioritized, that's what I did. But I love being on shows, and I probably will in the future, because I miss being on radio. Radio is so much fun.
Yes, it is. Radio is a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, I know you're limited. I know you're limited on time, but so I want to, of course, get to closing remarks. But first, do you have anything else to share?
I think we covered a lot of things. Just remember, for the people listening, that no matter where you are in your life, you're not broken.
That's right.
One thing that just came to me a couple of months ago that I really realized is, even if I wasn't assaulted, even if, I didn't have my medical conditions, I would still be a different person than what I was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, we're always changing, right?
yeah,
I don't think
always.
anybody's in their 30s and was the same person they were in their 20s or as a teenager. So
Oh no.
I think that's really just important to point out is we're always changing, we're evolving, and no matter what you're going through, that doesn't mean that you are less worthy of love or healthy relationships with other people, whether it's family, friends, and self-care isn't selfish too. It really isn't.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a good message there. Well, so if you don't have anything else before we do our customary wrap up, Tyler, do you have any other questions?
Yeah. You know, if you ever want, you're more than happy to be, what do you call that? A contributor to our podcast from time to time if you want.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I have lots I could talk about.
We're in the process. We're in the process of developing monetization strategies and affiliate programs, and so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I would love to. We'd love to continue working with you and all other guests, and to see how we can change the world together. So.
And like I said, we have a radio station too, so you can be a part of that too.
It's called Real Variety Radio.
That's
nice.
right. Real Variety
I would love to.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think we are good.
So Tyler, let's ask this question together. You know what it is. So we ask all the guests.
Oh goodness.
So Tyler, let's try and say it simultaneously. Okay. So what advice
would you give
to anybody,
to anyone who is struggling,
who's struggling right now,
who feels to have no hope?
Yeah.
Hope is there, even when it seems like it's so far and that light is dim. You can get there. Look for it. I talk about in my book about how sometimes when you're just faced with adversity, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be something big. It is so easy to just kind of crawl under the covers, pretend the world doesn't exist, and get into that hole. But there is hope. There is light. It is possible. It's not going to be that way forever. You're not going to be in this dark place forever.
That's right.
That's right. And no, because it's never too late to accomplish what you want in life.
It may look differently than what you thought it would, but yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on Hope Without Sight. Your story is incredible. Everybody, when her book comes out, please get it everywhere you get books. And what's it called again for the guests?
My Body Is Not Your Dartboard.
Oh yeah, My Body Is Not Your Dartboard. It's a great memoir. Well, everybody, give it up for Pey Carter, everybody. Episode 20.
Woo!
Woo!